Okay, once again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Plan Company's New York City COVID-19 janitorial and security best practices. Just wanted to give everyone a little background, how this came about, what we're looking to accomplish. Every Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. now, Plan Companies does a large town hall where we bring a whole bunch of vendors together. And it's global. It's in all the markets that we service, and it's great information for everyone. We thought it might better serve our local communities to do specific to market town halls, and that's how this all came about. So today, you're going to hear from Diane Solari, who is our representative for New York City, and we will talk more specific about the New York City landscape and some of the things that you should be aware of, and hopefully provide you with some best practices for the New York City market. Just some housekeeping items down below, or perhaps it could be somewhere else on your screen, but you'll see a Q&A button. This town hall is driven by your questions. So after a short presentation, we will dive into your questions. Anything you like. So you'll click on that Q&A button, you'll put your questions in there, and we'll be sure to answer them after our short presentation today. We are recording, so you'll find a recording of this on our website, www.plancompanies.com, and it'll be on the COVID-19 page. There will be a reference page towards the end of this presentation for you to be able to take your time and write down the information I just presented to you. Next slide, please. So quickly, my name is Dino Giuliano. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Plan Companies. I've been with the company for 17 years. I'm headquartered in New Jersey, so not too far away from you. And the star attraction today, and I'll turn it over to your representative, your New York City person, Diane Solari.
Thank you, Dino, and good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Diane Solari, and I am the Director of Business Development for Plan Companies here in New York City. As many of you probably know, New York, specifically New York City, has been unfortunately at the epicenter of this coronavirus nightmare in the US. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time today to present some information about kind of what has transpired over the past couple of months, and then jump into how COVID-19 will affect things from a janitorial perspective moving forward. Next slide, please, Vinny. Okay, so like I just said, we'll just cover the COVID-19 landscape here in New York City, followed by some adjustments for COVID-19 from a janitorial point of view. And then Dino will take it over again and discuss security, and then we'll end on a Q&A. Next slide, please. All right, so just to put things in perspective, here are some quite staggering facts and figures. So unemployment claims in New York City have reached 1.4 million as of May 13th. COVID-19 positive cases were at about 186,000, and deaths about 15,000, pretty astounding. Next slide, please. Okay, so due to this outbreak, it's been a crazy couple of months here in New York, like in many parts of the US and the world for that matter. So much has happened and unfolded, and I just wanted to highlight kind of some of what's gone on. So March 1st was the first coronavirus case in New York, followed by the first coronavirus-related death on March 14th. On March 20th, Governor Cuomo signed the New York State on Pause executive order, which closed 100% of non-essential businesses statewide. Obviously, some industries were excluded from this, such as food production, grocery stores, pharmacies, etc. And the order also instituted a 6-foot social distancing requirement. April 15th, Governor Cuomo ordered all New Yorkers to wear face coverings when social distancing is not possible. And then in early May, Mayor Bill de Blasio said that the city plans to open 40 miles of streets in May and nearly 100 miles over the course of the city's COVID-19 outbreak to pedestrians. This is kind of interesting, especially because, you know, it's so difficult to social distance here in New York for anyone who lives or works here. You know, the second you walk outside your door, it's very hard to stay 6 feet away from each other. So it's a nice way to get people outside safely. May 4th, Governor Cuomo, some good news, Governor Cuomo announced the New York reopening plan that consists of 4 phases and requires regions of the state to meet certain criteria to enter phase 1. I believe some regions of New York have met these criteria. As of tomorrow, they'll be able to start phase 1 reopening. Unfortunately, New York City has not yet met these milestones, but hopefully soon. Next slide, please. So here are just a couple of testimonials from our clients, kind of highlighting our operations team and our field associates. They are essential workers, and they've been, you know, showing up to work every day, putting their lives on the line. And it's just nice to hear, you know, some good feedback. So just take a quick second to review those, and then we can move on to the next slide, please. All right, so it should come as no surprise that we're all going to have to make some adjustments when it comes to janitorial protocols in this new world we're living in. So I just want to review some recommendations to make sure that you're covering your bases as you begin to open up. So, you know, if we simply just go back to the way things were, we kind of will have lost the lesson in all of this, and that could just be terrible if we have to revert back to going on lockdown again and everything. So we want to proceed with caution and really take some of these adjustments to heart. So first and foremost, you want to maintain an open channel of communication. You know, there's so much new information being presented to us on almost a daily basis now. It's kind of overwhelming. So it's crucial to ensure your staff is being provided the latest information and knowledge so that they can, you know, perform their duties safely and effectively. To that point, there should be one main point of contact between management and the janitorial staff. Again, to avoid confusion or misinformation, just have one person in charge of communicating information amongst the staff. Whether we're talking a commercial building where tenants are going to start re-entering the workplace, or a residential property where residents might start returning to work or using amenity spaces again, everyone needs to be aligned and just on the same page. So, you know, there's going to be new protocols and procedures that the janitorial team will need to abide by, and as well as tenants and residents of any given, you know, property or community. So schedule daily check-in, again, just communicating at least once a day will ensure that the team has all of the updated information they need to do their job thoroughly, effectively, and safely. Okay, so if your janitorial services are contracted, or even if they're not, even if you have a team hired in-house, you need to have a plan in place for the following. So updated cleaning protocols, you know, things are going to change and have already changed in terms of an updated scope of work to include disinfecting, especially high touch spots like doorknobs, light switches, etc. And the staff should feel safe and secure. Therefore, you know, you need to make sure they have the proper PPE in order to do their job correctly and safely. So activation protocols in case there's a confirmed case. If someone does test positive for the coronavirus on your janitorial team, you need to have a plan. You need to have staff available. You need to have floaters to make sure that someone can step in and provide coverage. And at the same time, they need to also be provided with the proper PPE and training protocols to adequately provide that coverage. Next slide, please. All right, so continuing on here with some program adjustments, proper training on chemistries and tools and equipment. So again, disinfecting is critical these days. You want to confirm that the janitorial staff is aware of which products to use, how to use them, and what their daily scope of work and task list will look like on a day-to-day basis now. And again, PPE, make sure that all the staff has what they need, and make sure that they're also being taught how to properly wear their PPE. It's kind of amazing to see how many people don't know how to, wear a mask properly. So do that training as well for your team. CDC recommendation updates. Again, there's so much new information out there every day. The CDC website is a reliable source to check regularly because they're releasing new information on a daily basis. Showing appreciation to the janitorial team. This is an important one. Like I said earlier, these associates are, showing up to work every day, whether it's a porter or a matron, a concierge associate, a security guard. They're really putting their lives on the line every single day, showing up to work to make our lives easier and safer. So a small thank you really does go a long way, makes them feel appreciated and like, the work they're doing is meaningful and important. And it's encouraging and supportive for them too. Consider killing time on disinfectants. So killing time refers to the amount of time you need to leave a solution on a surface for it to be effective and for it to kill bacteria and viruses. So the kill time varies by product. So you want to make sure you're reading the label or reading the information along with the product or solution and abiding by those instructions and passing that information along to your janitorial crew so everyone's aware of proper protocol and how to use these products. Increasing inventory. So I'm sure everyone remembers at the beginning of this pandemic, and even now, it was very difficult to acquire the proper PPE. Some cleaning products and solutions and equipment were also very hard to come by. So supply chains are still getting adjusted, and you don't want to get stuck without the proper tools and equipment. So plan ahead as much as possible. Place orders now, even if you're not planning on reopening just yet. You just don't want to get stuck, in a vulnerable place without the proper tools and equipment for your team. Floating crews, I touched on this before, but God forbid somebody gets sick or needs to quarantine, you need to have a bench or floaters in place to step in and provide coverage. And again, those associates also need to be properly trained and provided with the correct PPE to do their job. Signage. So, we want to remind people to keep distance. We want to remind them where and how far away they should stand. There might be limits to the amount of people that are permitted in certain areas, whether it's an elevator, amenity space, waiting areas, lobby areas. So posting notices and proper instruction for people is huge. Next slide, please. So I'm actually now going to turn it back over to Dino.
Thank you, Diane, and phenomenal job. I really appreciate that. New York City is lucky to have you. And if anyone wants to start asking any questions at this time, remember the Q&A button below to start loading in any janitorial questions. And perhaps as we talk about security a little bit now, it'll provoke you into some security questions. So just some basic stuff around security and front desk, I might say. During times like this, anytime that we've had struggles in the country, especially when it affects the economy, crime tends to go on a rise. In addition to all those amazing things Diane shared with you regarding janitorial and how important it is to keep your building safe and clean, don't forget the safe part around security. You want to make sure that you're buttoning things down, keeping your staff safe. When COVID wasn't in effect, prior to all this craziness, lobbies tended to be an area where people would hang out. Residents would hang out with their concierge, talk to them. This was the focal point for many, many properties. And the concierge being the ambassador to the building and knowing what's happening about everything and everywhere in the area. So they tend to linger. This is not the time for that. So Diane talked about communication. It's imperative that you communicate with your residents about rules and regulations when they do come down to the lobby, if they are going to need to be around the front desk staff or ask questions. She mentioned having the 6-foot rules, maybe putting tape on the floor, some plastic barriers around your staff. So as you see in the illustrations here, you know, a basic barrier that you'd see for a drum kit or even in your grocery stores these days, having that separation to keep everyone your staff safe and your residents safe. You know, your concierge, of course, and your security personnel are going to have PPE. They're going to have their masks and gloves, just like your janitorial staff. But this helps protect both ways. You want to have familiarity in your buildings, especially around the front desk. You want people who know your building. So keeping them safe, keeping them healthy should be priority for everyone in the building. Locking down doors that were previously open. You want to have one central point of egress and ingress to your building more than ever now. You want to make sure that if a contractor is coming into your building to do work, that they have the proper PPE to enter your building, that they are screened, and that they register, that they're signed in, that you know when they've come in and when they've gone out. Perhaps in the past you had several entrances, maybe you had a back door or another entrance for people to come in. Now more than ever, you want one focal point where you can track the comings and goings of everyone. Locking down supplies. Diane mentioned how critical things are now. Cleaning supplies are harder to come by. Heck, toilet papers are still hard to come by. Supplies that you had in your building and never thought were gold before have now become gold. And these areas and these supplies need to be locked down, and perhaps more than ever, more secure than they were before. So I think, you know, perhaps if you have a roving security team, that they regularly check on these areas to make sure that these critical supplies are being monitored. Securing amenities. I think, you know, there's a lot of amenities, especially in New York City, that are still locked down. Some of those amenities will perhaps start reopening. There's talk about some of the outdoor stuff. Heck, even pools are being considered to be reopened. Whatever you decide to do in your building, make sure the communication to the residents is critical, and make sure that you monitor what's happening with this. So your security team, if they don't have cameras on there, or your concierge don't have cameras on these amenities areas, you want to make sure that they are roving. You may need an extra person involved to rove the property and make sure that the lockdown areas stay locked down. We've had incidents in some of the properties where residents took it upon themselves to open up some barbecue areas on nice days and areas that were locked down. So it's important that you have these rules, and more importantly, perhaps, that you are able to enforce the rules that you have around amenities and communicate. If you're going to open something, let them know how, let them know when, let them know what the new procedure is going to be, because for sure, these areas, when they do reopen, will not reopen in the same way that they were being used before. So you definitely want to keep an eye on amenities. Something not listed here, but I do want to talk about, is packages. I think much like during the holiday time, packages are coming in abundance. This is how people are shopping now. They're getting groceries in the mail. They're getting things through Amazon. All the needs at home, they're not going out as much as they don't have to. So packages are becoming a big thing. What some properties are considering doing is having packages delivered up to their unit. Rather than have residents come down, have to touch elevator buttons, have to touch lobby furniture, have to interact with your front desk staff, collect a package, call ahead, let them know we'll be delivering, simply bring it up to the unit. Again, you may need an additional person to do this, so you don't leave your lobby unattended. Knock on the door, let them know their package is there, walk away, and then they can have their package. It could eliminate a lot of people moving about the building. Some other buildings have taken it even a step further. You know, Diane mentioned killing time on surfaces. There was an estimate put out by the CDC that things can live on cardboard or packages for up to 3 days. Some communities have decided to take some of these amenity spaces that have been closed down and use them as package rooms. And what they would do is rotate the packages within these areas. So the gym perhaps is closed. So package area number 1 Monday would be the gym. And those packages would sit there until Thursday when they would be delivered to the units. And then that room would get sterilized, and then you would put new packages in there for a following day. So holding packages for 3 days, disinfecting the room, coming back, and then delivering those packages again are one of the practices that we're seeing out there. So I hope that helps a little bit around security. We are going to, go ahead, Vinny, you can go to the next slide. We'll leave this slide up here while we do our Q&A. Some of the resources I talked about, our website, a way to get a hold of us, and then just some useful New York City and the CDC websites if you're not familiar with them. Want to bring in to answer some of our janitorial questions. We want to welcome Juan Jose Chavez. JJ has been with Plan. He's an expert in janitorial and maintenance and front desk and security for that matter. But we're happy to have JJ here to answer any of your questions. Welcome, JJ.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. So we're going to get started, and we're going to dive right into one for JJ. So janitorial question. How much of a heads up do you need before we go back to work? We normally have planned to order our janitorial supplies and want to make sure you have enough time to get the supplies. That's a great and thoughtful question, actually.
Yeah, that's a good question. I will say that the more, the better. Right now, depending on the supply. So a couple of things to clarify. Not every single janitorial supply is experiencing, a delay or a shortage, right? So it really depends on what we order for you, as a customer. But I will say, if we're talking about personal protected equipment or items such like that, I will say anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks, it will be great. But if we're talking about, broom and pens and, all that, we can secure those, next day if needed. But for some specialty items, I will say anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks.
Fantastic, and thank you for that, JJ. So just a quick question for myself around front desk, and some of the questions are how do we think things might be different when things start opening up? And I think the 6-foot distancing rule is going to stay in place for some time now. I don't think that that's going to change once we slowly open up. I think PPE will be in effect for quite some time for our staff. We want to make sure we keep them safe. We want to make sure that they have a proper barrier of protection for themselves and for the safety of the residents. And I think there'll be more, and you can almost feel it every time you put it on the TV, there's going to be more rules. There's going to be more enforcement happening. There's going to be more, you can use perhaps this area from this time to this time. Someone's going to have to monitor that. You're going to be able to, packages are going to be handled this way. So I think much like after, dare I say it, 9/11, which all of us in this area went through a horrific time, things never went back to being the same again, whether at the airport or just our level of awareness. I think you'll see that for our front desk, for our security teams, for sure. And I think that will be in effect for quite some time. So thank you for that question. And I will move on. And I have another janitorial question. JJ, are you ready for another one?
I am ready, sir. Go ahead, shoot.
Did you have enough time to rest? I hope from that last one. Okay. JJ, should janitorial expect a is there a shortage of PPEs expected as a result of where we are right now?
We're starting to experiencing some shortage as it relates to face masks, the surgical type. N95 masks are really tough to find right now, and I think that this is where, if you go through, a trusted janitorial provider, or if you are contracting those services out, your janitorial provider should have great relationships with, the main distributors in the country of these supplies. And this is, for example, something that we as plant companies is able to, we are able to offer to our customers, because, our suppliers are pretty much the first ones that are able to secure these items, and therefore we're able to offer them, to provide them to our customer. There is some shortage that we're starting to see. If you really think about it as it relates to masks and even gloves, a couple of months ago, restaurants didn't have to order that really for their staff, right? Or any other business really. Now, depending on where you are, for example, here in Georgia, restaurants are opening, but the servers need to have, masks and gloves, right? So that is a spike in that demand, and that will create some shortage for about 1 week or so for gloves and masks per se. And the other thing too is to consider is that perhaps the price of those items might increase a little bit. For example, we have been communicated with a couple of our vendors that we use, and they're telling us that we should be expecting a price increase between 17 to 20% on those items. So I think that that is something that everybody should consider as well.
Fantastic. JJ, great answer. Really appreciate that. And we have time for one more question. And Diane, how about we throw this one to you? Will an increase in security worry the residents? How do I ensure peace of mind when adding security to my building? That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Dino, I'll let you jump in to elaborate. But honestly, I think residents and tenants would appreciate the extra security. As you mentioned before, especially during times like this, it can leave people feeling vulnerable. So I've heard it myself from clients that they appreciate the extra added layer of security right now.
Yeah, I think you answered that perfectly. I think it's also important, in addition to what Diane's saying, it's important that the staff are properly trained. Having a company or your team trained on customer service, as well as the importance of being the eyes and ears of your community, is critical. So I think that helps making residents feel safe, and yet still that they're being treated well, and therefore not bringing concern. So that takes us to the end of our presentation today. I want to thank JJ. Diane, you did a phenomenal job. We will leave the screen open for everyone right here if you want to take some last minute notes. This series will continue for you in New York City. We will do it again. This is a start, so let anyone else know that who you think could benefit from this series that Diane will be performing for you in New York City, so we can bring more help to others that are out there. Remember, Tuesdays at 10 a.m. with Planned. We have over 10 panelists now. I think we're at 11 or 12 now, actually, to answer your questions. Anything from painting to, we have pest control this week. Anything you could possibly imagine that a vendor could do, we have a resource on our Tuesday morning call. So hope you will join us for that, and you can sign up at our COVID-19 page if you're interested in that. Other than that, Diane, thanks again. Diane and I are going to fade off here, but we're going to leave the screen up for you. Thank you so much for attending, and we hope we see you again next time.